Great, Bolivia. Thank you. Okay. Um, Great. So sorry for the last minute and for confusion. Also, last week was a bit, times are a bit not not as usual, one can say, and we're all trying our best in all of it. And the stability that we have is from the Torah, so it was important for me to have at least the final shiur before. I'm sure many have gone off already on a summer break, but there's never a break from Torah. But anyway, this will be our final shiur. So this week's parasha, the name of the parasha is Chukat. Chukat, and the translation, right? This is actually it's an example, right? If we look at the different type of mitzvot, then our sages teach us that there's some of the mitzvot that are easy to understand and easy, that their logic is very simple for us. And there are others in which the logic takes some explanation in order to understand what is the reasoning behind the Torah. And then we have something which is called chukat, and the translation of chukat would be the statute of you can even say the constitution of the Torah. But we would expect, if we're going to have the Torah giving us what are the statutes, we know what statutes are. In other words, if you have a protocol, or you have an organization, or you have a community, then you have a statute in which is setting the basic laws of the community. But that is the word that is used also in modern Hebrew today, but it's not the same in the Torah, because we know from this example in the Torah that there's a different meaning. And what does it mean when the Torah tells us there's a chukah, there's a law? So the law itself is something which is very it could mean that you don't understand the logic, or don't even try to understand the logic behind it. And the example which is given this week begins with giving the example of the red heifer, the red calf, which was something completely illogical. And what is illogical? First of all, what is the basis of the mitzvah that is spoken what is it, before we go into the Midrash itself, what is it that we are discussing? So if someone was impure, there's different levels of impurity, right? Olivia, you can take off the share screen as long as you know how to get back to it, so that I can see everyone clearly. Thank you. And then we'll get back. And if people would like to turn on their screens, I would love to see you. But what is the thank you. So what is there's, as I said, there's different levels of impurity. For example, we're not used to this idea of pure and impure, which is itself is very difficult to explain. Because many times, even today, when we talk about kashrut, or many, I don't know if you've had the experience yourself in trying to explain to someone about kashrut, but many times, especially when someone comes and wants to be sensitive to me, they say, right, oh, well, I can't touch it because I'm going to make it impure. Has anyone, right, have you heard that from someone? Like I've gone to, I'm in a diplomatic setting or whatever, and then someone says, well, I can't touch it, right, because then it will become non-kosher. But we know that that's not the case, right? Just by someone touching something, it doesn't become non-kosher. So we're used to today talking about something which is we can eat, something which is kosher and non-kosher. When do we actually use the term of purity? Today, it's not so common when we talk about being pure. A lot of it surrounds the laws regarding purity and impurity, regarding intimate relations between the woman and the man, especially because you have specific periods which are considered pure and impure, right? But then if we were living at the time of the temple, this idea of purity and impurity would be would be no less in our lives than kosher and non-kosher today. Because if, for example, you take an offering to the temple, then you have to be pure in order to, first of all, go to the temple. Secondly, if you want to eat from the offering, you have to be pure. And then anyone else who is not pure can't even touch or can't take part in your meal. And then you have different levels of the purity. You have the priests who can eat, right, who have to be constantly pure. And therefore, if you go to Jerusalem today, to the archaeological sites surrounding the Kotel, for example, you will see that there's many, many mikvaot. There are many, many of the purity baths that were today we know is used, or the most common again is used when a woman goes to the mikveh once a month, or for conversion, right? When you go and you become pure and you become a part of the Jewish nation. So you go through that process of the mikveh. But again, if we were in the time of Jerusalem, so Yerushalayim is the city called Ir HaKodesh, the city of purity, right? It's a holy city. And in that sense, the Kohanim, the priests who were working in the temple, had to constantly be pure. So anything that they touched impure, they would have to be constantly going to the mikveh. Last last year, I was allowed into like a secret section under the kotel, which you can't really access or public access. And they have they have a line of showers and mikvaot that they have discovered that were used by the Kohanim just before they went up the ramp to go into the temple area. So I've heard some people, I haven't got into it, some people who claim that the temple never existed, that it's a made-up story, etc., etc. I think just looking at the archaeological evidence and being there, and you see the purity baths of the Kohanim, and the whole upper city of Jerusalem was a city of Kohanim. And you had other cities in Israel which were only for the Kohanim because they had special laws of purity. But then someone else, right, who would become pure would be allowed to go up to the temple, right, as long as you're pure. But then we have another level of purity, which is the most distinct level of pure and impure, which is whenever one comes into the vicinity of someone who has died. And the very fact that that is the most serious level of what is and what is not impure gives us, I think, a better definition, which is very difficult to explain what is and what is not pure. And I think you can tell me if it makes sense to you, but if we were to say, what does it mean to be impure? What does it mean, first of all, to be pure? Because I use the word holy and pure, which are very close to each other, but what does it mean to be pure? Or what does it mean to be impure? So the fact that someone who is dead teaches us that we know that that is the most impure, teaches us that life is the most pure. And what is the essence of life itself? Is the soul of God within us. So therefore, when we have the soul of God, then that is the source of all purity, because that is, right, the spiritually, right, a part of the infiniteness of God, which is in us, our neshama, our soul. And then when that leaves us, the fact that we had it and we lost it, that is the source of impurity. So something which was not ever alive, then doesn't have that voidness of not having that godliness, and therefore it's not as impure as something else. So you have different levels. You have an animal which was alive. A stone doesn't have that sense of impurity because it's never had that life essence in it. So you have the animals which have the level of nefesh, as it says in the Torah, right? They're both translated as soul, but you have the nefesh and the neshama. So you have the animal which has the nefesh, and therefore, yes, if a dog dies, then something has left it, right? That life source has left it, and therefore, if you touch that dog, you bury that dog, then there is that sense, there is that impurity. And the higher level is of the human being, because every human being has the soul, right? We have the soul in us. It's not about, and please tell me if any of this, right, makes sense, because as I said from the beginning, it's very, very difficult to explain. It's not something that we used to, it doesn't fit the modern world so much. But it's not about right and wrong. Many times we think I've done something wrong, then I become impure. That's not the case. Because someone who has done the biggest mitzvah of all, which is to take care of the dead person, and respectfully, right, the Chevra Kadisha, we have the society which is called the Holy Society, who deal with all of the ritual of caring for the person after he has died and purifying them for the burial, and taking care of them, or the relatives, which, right, it's a big mitzvah that they be a part of the funeral and that they carry the person to his or her final resting place. So they have done a mitzvah, but on the other hand, they have become impure. It doesn't have to do with right and wrong. Because you've come close to that, then you have become impure. But then all of that is an introduction to the beginning of the mitzvah, of the beginning of this week's parasha of Chukat. And what does it say? It says something even more illogical. That how do you get rid of this impurity? So one could say, oh, well, you should take a good shower. Maybe you have to have a double mikvah. Maybe you have to, I don't know what, how do you get rid of this level? The Torah says you have to have a red heifer, a red calf, which does not have one single white hair on it. And you burn the calf, and you take the ashes from this from this cow, and those ashes are used a specific way in order with water. Oh, look.
Moshe David, are you still there?
Back. I lost my phone. I'm trying. Can you hear me still or no?
We can hear you.
Now nothing?
We can
Can
still
you hear me?
we can hear you. We just can't see you.
Yeah, okay. But that's okay. Let's try.
Now we can see you.
Okay, we're trying our best. Okay, I hope you can hear me and see me now.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, sorry again. So basically, you take the ashes, right? And these ashes are then mixed in a specific way, in a method, and then the Kohen, right, would then put them on the person who was impure, and that person would become pure. But to make it even stranger, right? The Kohen who made the person impure, made the impure, that person becomes pure. But the Kohen himself, right, the person who is making the person impure becomes pure. That person himself becomes impure. So it makes no sense because we would usually think, right, that, well, if I am the source, if I am now pure, then I can make someone else pure. But if I am impure, then I make the other person impure. But in this case, it's exactly the opposite. So a lot of this, the Torah from the beginning tells us there's a system, there's a spiritual system that Hashem has put in the world. This is how it works, and you have to trust it. And that trust itself is an essential part of our emunah, our faith in being Jewish. That not everything makes sense. And there have been many, many different attempts over Jewish history for people until this day, for people to give all the logic and the reasoning for why the Torah, how every single mitzvah makes sense. And you have, for example, books like the book by Josephus Flavius, who goes through the entire Torah and wants to make it make sense according to Roman logic. And then you have today people who will do the same with democracy and say why the mitzvot fit perfectly with democracy, which is nice because we want our worlds to fit. But there's also a point in which you say, even if it doesn't fit, even if it doesn't have the reasoning that I have right now, even if I don't have the logic and I don't understand it, I still have to do it. And this is at a level of which Hashem says the wisdom of understanding this is beyond the logic of the normal human being, and therefore it must be something that we just accept. So that was, before I go forward into the Midrash, I'd like to just hear from you, that does my not making sense make any sense, right? In other words, just basically an understanding what is and what is not pure and impure, does at least that level make any sense to you? Or any comments that you have before we see the Midrash? Olivia, you're nodding your head, so you have to help me here. Tell me what makes sense and what doesn't make sense.
I think explaining it in regards to death, and how impurity is explained through that, I think makes it make sense for me. Especially because your logical mind is thinking, when you think about pure and impure, is thinking about, or mine is clean and dirty. But as you said, that it has nothing to do with that, which sometimes can be hard to comprehend, but it makes sense to me when you explain it in regards to death.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it is a world which is, you can imagine, like certain things. I sometimes try to think of different worlds of communication that work just differently than what we are used to. Right? Until Jane Goodall went and spent years with the chimpanzees, we knew nothing about them until someone developed that level of communication so we can understand. And now you have, I saw a research of artificial intelligence trying to decipher levels of whale communication that no human being has ever been managed to do, recordings that we have. So there's different worlds that work on different levels that we're not used to. And especially when we're talking about something which is spiritual, it's a different world, especially in the normal world that we live in. But I would also say in reference to what we reference, which is many times Christianity, because even the words sacred, holy, all of these words in whatever language, they don't have the same essence with them, and they've been really changed a lot or transformed through Christianity into something which is very, very far from what it means in the Torah. Which is why when even the words like pure or impure, sacred, what is holy, I once had a discussion with the previous Archbishop of Sweden on what is sacred and what is holy. What is our examples of sacred and holy in Swedish society today? For me, it's very easy to say what is sacred and what is holy because our entire Jewish world is filled with things which are sacred and holy. From the Kiddush to Havdalah to Yom Kippur to our children, they're all sacred and holy. But these are words which are very, very strange um, to deal with, and that's maybe why also many feel very strange or very superficial from the experience of walking into a church and not feeling that there's a bridge between them. That's another discussion. So let's go forward to the Midrash, who tries to try to say, okay, let's take the example of of the person who is known as the most wise, and see, right, what wisdom is, and whether Solomon, King Solomon, right, who is known as the wisest person to ever live on this planet, what is wisdom in that? Let us begin from the beginning, and then we'll see a bit about Solomon. So Zot Chukat Torah, this is the statute of the Torah. Rabbi Yitzchak began, all this I attempted with wisdom. I said, I will become wise, but it is distant from me. So this is a pasuk, this is a passage in Kohelet, which is said by Solomon. So Solomon himself, who is the most, right, the wisest person on earth, says, I attempted all of this with wisdom, but it is distant from me. It is written, God granted wisdom to Solomon like the sand that is on the seashore. Right? So the idea of sand like on the seashore, which is the term used in the Torah for something which is infinite, that is beyond counting, right? You can't count the amount. You know that there's a number, but you can't reach that number, or the amount of how much sand there is on the seashore. Could be, again, an interesting question to ask artificial intelligence. Can you count the sand on the seashore and see what you get? But the Torah uses it, and we see it both in the Torah and then in Kings, because it's a blessing given that Am Yisrael will be like the sand on the seashore. And here then it is used in a different sense in Kings, where it says Hashem gave wisdom like the sand on the seashore. So like the sand, the rabbi said he granted him wisdom corresponding to that of all of Israel. And as it is stated, the number of the children of Israel will be like the land of the sea. So as we mentioned, the blessing of the people of Israel, they will be like the sand. And it says this wisdom is like the sand, which means that if you took all of the wisdom of all of the children of Israel, it wouldn't match up to the wisdom of Solomon. Rabbi Levi said, just as the sand is a barrier for the sea, so too wisdom was contained within Solomon. The parable, they say, you lack knowledge, what have you acquired? You acquired knowledge, what are you lacking? A man with no constraint to his spirit is a breached city without a wall. So very interestingly, Rabbi Levi, instead of talking about how numerous the sand is, he looks at the attribute of the sand. And what is the sand? Basically, the sand is a barrier which protects. We know that, right? That it protects the land, and it protects the seashore from the waves. And we also know today, for example, when you look at some of the tsunamis that have hit and caused all of this damage and loss of life, it's because, right, even the plants that were supposed to be protective on the sand itself were gone, right? And that there's a protective system which the sand is there to protect what is behind it, including humans and plants and everything on the ground. And it's an amazing thing to think of, because when you think of where does sand come from, the sand comes from the crustaceans, which are broken down into these tiny, tiny pieces, right? And rocks and bones from animals. And it has become all of this material, which has become a protective wall for at the edge of the sea. So Rabbi Levi is looking at this and he says, when we look at the sand, it shouldn't only be that we're looking at how numerous it is, rather it is a barrier. And what is the wisdom? Wisdom is not something which is only something that I spread, but the secret of true wisdom is also something which I contain. So the fact that Solomon was able to keep all this wisdom within himself is the parable which is connected to the sea. So, and they bring this parable, which was apparently a parable which was well known in their times. If you lack knowledge, what have you acquired? When you acquired knowledge, what are you lacking? A man with no constraint to his spirit is a breached city without a wall. In other words, being wise is one thing, but knowing what to do with that wisdom and to keep it within yourself is also something part of the wisdom itself. And we can continue. Solomon's wisdom exceeded the wisdom of all the people of the East. What was the wisdom of the people of the East? They were knowledgeable and clever in divination by bird calls. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, regarding three matters I praise the people of the East. They do not kiss on the mouth, but rather on the hand. They do not bite with their mouth, but they cut with the knife. And they seek counsel only in a spacious area, as one consults only in the field. Anyone want to, right? First of all, who are the people of the East that we're talking about here? What do you think? Who could the people of the East be? When we talk about West and East, right? What are the people of the East? Anyone? So today, when we talk about West, we think about Western society. But in their world, it's interesting that if they talk about the people of the East, then apparently the people are thinking of themselves as being either in the center or the West, right? Because if you talk about the people of the East, then they are not right of the West. Even till this day, the Jews who have immigrated, for example, to Israel from the Arab countries are called Edot HaMizrach, the people from the East, right? And in general, if we talk about East today, if we look to the Far East, when we talk about the Far East, so right, it could be that you're talking about the people of India, for example, right, in the people living in that area. And we know that through the Silk Route, there were clothes and also people coming with all of these very fascinating spices and everything that were coming through, right, from the Nabatean times, right, but also right during the Talmudic times. So, first of all, I find it fascinating that we have a reference to the wisdom of the East. In other words, the very fact that you say Solomon's wisdom exceeded the wisdom of all the people of the East means that you're considering them smart people, right? You don't say someone is smarter than someone stupid, right? So you say Solomon's wisdom exceeded the wisdom of those in the East means that they were considered wise people, that they had something very wise. The first example given here is they were knowledgeable and clever in divination by bird calls. In other words, that they were very close and they had a deep understanding of animal communication, which is fascinating in itself, that this is what is considered wise. What is considered wise is they don't know 10,000 books by heart, or you can give many examples of what is considered wise, but they were knowledgeable and clever in, right, the fact that they were communicating. with animals. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, he gives cultural examples that in which way he doesn't even say that they are wise, but he says, I praise the people of the East, that they're not vulgar, they don't kiss on the mouth, but rather on the hand. It's not talking about, I think, intimate relations, but rather, right, when people are meeting each other. Until this day, you have this custom in which people from, if you're meeting a rabbi, a grand rabbi, a chief rabbi, right, um, from the east, right, from the Arab countries, then it is very common that the deepest respect that you have is you will walk up and kiss him on the hand, right? So it's a matter of respect, for example, that's how to respect. They do not bite with their mouth, but they cut with a knife. Okay, this is something today which we might think the opposite, that in the Western world you have all the mannerisms of like eating properly, right, quote unquote, whereas in the East they're more vulgar. But here it is the opposite, that they're eating with manners. And the third, not connected to the first two, they seek counsel only in the spacious area as one consults only in the field. In other words, having the understanding that if you want to consult, you should do it in a place where you're alone and that you're not in a place where someone can listen to you. Okay, let's continue on. That Solomon was exceeded the wisdom of all the people of the East, but also all the wisdom of Egypt. So all of the wisdom of Egypt, what was the wisdom of Egypt? You find that when Solomon sought to build the temple, he sent to Paro Necho. Right? We know this name from the Tanakh, that this was the name of the Pharaoh. Pharaoh is a title, right? And the Pharaoh living at the time of Solomon was Paro Necho. And Solomon was summoned through his wisdom and diplomacy, he was able to have relations with all the surrounding kings, right? From Lebanon to Egypt. So he sent to Pharaoh Necho, and he said to him, send me craftsmen at their standard wages that are seek to build a temple. What did he do? He assembled all his astrologers. They looked and saw people who were destined to die that year and sent them to him. When they came to Solomon, he saw by means of the truth of the divine spirit that they would die that year. He gave them their shrouds and sent them to him. He said to him, did you not have shrouds with which to bury your bed? Here they are for you, they and their shrouds. In other words, he was, right, Solomon was he was looking to be in peace with Pharaoh Necho. And we know that Egypt, part of the wisdom, and you can see it from till this day with the pyramids and the fact that the way that they are matched up with astrology and the wisdom that they had, this was a large part of their belief system. So Pharaoh, he wanted to trick Solomon. So why did Solomon, the question that we can ask, which the Midrash here doesn't ask, is why did Solomon send to ask Pharaoh for help in the first place? So he recognizes the fact that the Egyptians are masters at building. And when he wants to build the temple, so first of all, he knows where to get the best wood, which is from Lebanon, and he makes a peace treaty with the king there in order to do so. But then when he looks for craftsmen, he wants to take the best and the wisest that exists. And again, if you look to one of the fascinating questions till this day, which we still don't have a proper answer, is that how were the pyramids built? Right? How did they manage, and with what team and what mechanics? Right? How did they manage to first of all move? But how did they manage to have the precision in order to build the pyramids as they have been built? Until this day, we don't have an answer to that. So it's obvious that they were masters at building. And one of the wise things that Solomon does, he says, well, I don't have to think that I'm the best at everything. I'm going to go and ask for help from someone who's best at what he's best. And knows, so he asked for the masters of Egypt to come and build in the temple. So Pharaoh thinks that he's smart enough to, like, what does he do? He gathers all of the people that he knows from through the astrology. They look in the stars and they know who's going to die in the next year. And he sends him basically these, right, people who have, right, who are going to die. Then Solomon saw by means of the divine spirit that they would die in the year. What is the difference between the astrologers and the divine spirit? The divine spirit is a spiritual level which Solomon was connected to. It's something in which he was at that level of connection to Hashem, in which he could feel and sense the spirituality. But what is it that he has this Ruach HaKodesh, the divine spirit? It's not the same as prophecy. It's not that God came to him and says, right, Solomon, be careful, you should know that these people will die. But rather, he was able to sense through the divine spirit that they would die in that year. Because what did we say before about purity and impurity? That impurity is set by the fact that spirituality is leaving a person. And there is a sense in which someone who is on the way to die, right? If you can see in the stars that someone is going to die in the next year, you can also sense, if you're at that level of spirituality, that their soul is on their way out. That their soul, it's not something that happens abruptly. It's something that someone is in the process. And we ourselves can be so blind to the fact that we're so busy in our lives, we're so busy with everything, that we don't understand that our game is almost over. That we have all of these plans for the future, but if we would instead develop our own spirituality, we might have a sense of understanding that where we are on our spiritual path, and that we're actually on our way out. Or that what are we doing in our life, and what if what we're doing in our life is something which is giving us the growth and the life and the purity, right, to have sustainability or spirituality in order to continue living. Or are we so caught up in this world, in the material world that we're in, that we've completely lost touch with our own spirituality and our own soul. So, Shlomo Melech, King Solomon, he says to Pharaoh, why did you send me these dead people? And I'm just looking at this Midrash and I'm thinking to myself, imagine if we were walking down the street and we were able to have that vision, and we would see live people and dead people walking. If we would see people who were, right, those who would we want to be closer to? Who would we spend our time with? We spend our time with those who were providing life and energy and positivity to this world. How much time do we spend within the material world that we are in with people who are dead, walking dead, or people who are not providing any positive energy? Sometimes we can meet someone, they haven't said anything bad to us, but we're just drained, our energy is drained because that person has drained our life source, our energy from us. So I think there's a very deep lesson to understand here, that the Torah is teaching us when we talk about this idea of purity and impurity and that coming from the death, that it's not only when it happens, when we reach it at the end, it's also when we actually are living itself. Are we connecting ourselves to life, or are we connecting ourselves to death? Are we connecting ourselves to something which is like the temple, something which will energize us and give us the life?
or are we connecting to something that is draining our energy? And something which are draining our energy and something which is creating that negative sense for us is not something that we need to spend our time on or try to fix. Whereas there's a lot that we need to fix, or a lot that we can put our energy into. But we need to put our energy in this world into things which are a basis, which have a basis of life to them, not a base of death. Right? And therefore, when King Solomon, he reaches out to Pharaoh, he has the humility as the wisest person in the world to say, yes, I'm the wisest, but there's ancient tradition here that I can learn from. And why don't and I'm willing to open myself up to that. I don't have to think that because I'm the wisest, I know everything. Right? There's an ancient tradition, the masters at building. But Pharaoh instead says, you know what? He wants masters of building. I'm going to send him angels of death. I'm going to send him people who are going to drain all of the positive energy out of the Jewish people. And he sends them back and says, you can have your dead people back. No, thank you. I don't need them. So I think that, first of all, it's fascinating to think, what is it for us to think? If we were to say, what is the wisest? What does it mean to be wise? What does that mean for me? And our sages tell us, Eilu HaChacham, what is the definition of a wise person? Halomed mikol adam, someone who learns from every single person. It doesn't say learn from your friends, or learn from those around you. Every encounter that we have in our life is one in which we are learning, then that is the source of what will make us wise. So you see that even with the wisest person here, King Solomon, Shlomo Melech, number one. And number two is that to have the humility to reach out and say, come and teach me, right? Not I know everything, but I'd love to, right? I can reach out to that. And then the third level is to have the spiritual feeling, or to try to develop that sense of, is what I'm doing, and is this encounter an encounter of life or an encounter of death? Am I doing something from which I am growing spiritually, or is this something which is draining my spiritual energy? So that we only, through this Midrash, at least for me, I'm looking at not only that we look at the end of it and say, okay, I've become impure because I'm touched by death, but ask ourselves in life itself, am I touched by life, or am I touched by death? And I think that especially with all of the challenges that we all face in the last couple of years, at least last couple of years, these are huge questions for us. I was talking to someone today, someone called from the other side of the world to consult about combating anti-Semitism. And I said to this person, if your whole identity of combating anti-Semitism is based on the hatred of others, then you're just going to drain the energy instead of building what you want to build, the positivity itself. And if we give everyone the sense that everyone hates us all the time, and that is our focus, it's true that awareness has to be raised. But on the other hand, what is the source of your own positivity to give yourself the energy that you need in order to go forward? And if you're meeting up with and having a conference on anti-Semitism, just for everyone to walk around and say how terrible anti-Semitism is and how terrible everything is, then that's not going to give you any positive energy to build anything for yourself and to keep on and to go forward. So I think that there's the Torah here is telling us that there is some wisdom of trying to understand impurity and purity, what it is, what it means, but that the source of it all is a question of how much are you involved and connected and influenced by death itself, or can you step back from it and involve yourself in life and positive energy. Doesn't mean that I try to explain why it's the red calf. I know that some try to, but I feel that that itself is something that the Torah doesn't want us to do, right? The Torah says this is something you shouldn't deal with, right? Why is it this? But we try to touch a little bit today on the connection of life and death, purity, impurity, wise, what does it mean to be wise? And it's very interesting Midrash about Solomon's connection to the surrounding nations and what does it mean to be connected to the divine spirit as well. So I see there was some confusion for some regarding the shiur, and I'm sorry, I should have sent out a message that this will be the final shiur, but I will send out an email, and we have the shiur recorded as well with all the technical problems. Thank you, Olivia, for your help on that. We'll Bezrat Hashem see each other after the summer. So anyone would like to comment? We have a small class today, so anyone is very welcome. Barbara, I haven't heard your voice in a very long time. I'd love to hear what you're thinking. You are muted.
Yes, I don't hear you so well, Moshe David. I don't know. Something is coming.
If you have any thoughts, you're welcome to share. Do you have anything that you're thinking about?
No.
Okay, I won't put any pressure on you. It's okay. Anyone wants to share? It's a very difficult subject that we're talking about today. I hope I made some sense to you. And with all the technical, I know you can't hear so well, but I tried to do my best. Tikva, I know you came in just at the end, but thank you for joining.
I'm sorry, Rav Moshe. I didn't know that there was, but I heard a little bit about and I lost so much the shiur, the tema about the astrology and the divine spirit, because this is very important. The wisdom is not the same like intelligent. Not necessarily an intelligent person has wisdom. So we need bina for to serve Hashem and not to use a lot of time in the material things, because everything one day is gone. We have to use our time in ourselves and in to grow in the Torah and to do well. This is my I want to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just at the end, it's fantastic to hear. And just a final comment on what you said. It says that, there's some points in which someone gets too involved, they're too caught up in the material world, that what should one do? Remind himself of the day of death, which is a very sad statement. But if you think at the end of the day and you say, well, what is left of my body? What's going to be there at the end? Everything that I'm putting so much effort in, for me, for my children, for materialism, for my comfort. At the end, just think of, it's a very difficult thing to say, but think of your body, disappearing there and decomposing going back to its natural state, going back into earth, right? And what is left of you? What is the you that you're working so hard for? And that in itself, I think, is a very wise statement of our sages. Not such a happy statement, but there are some points in which you have to wake yourself up and say, what am I doing with myself? What am I doing with my life? What am I focusing on? With whom am I spending so many hours? Am I actually filling myself with positivity, with positive energy, being close to Hashem, or not? קדם, אתה יכול להגיד שלום. You saw my קדם here.
קדם.
תגיד שלום. I'm not pulling in. Okay. Okay, thank you. Laila to everyone, and thank you.
I would like to just say in the end, when I was
Yes.
thinking what you say, it is reminding me Kohelet, Hevel.
Yes.
It is because I am just studying Kohelet, book of Kohelet. So it's very, very truly this what everything is like flying and going back, and what will be left. So we have to take these moments what we have and try to be happy and be better.
And yeah, basically it is such a simple message by the wisest man on earth, right, by King Solomon, to really look at this and look in the mirror and say, what am I spending my hours on in life? Very much so. And it's all emptiness, and right, all this void of emptiness, of nothingness is what's left unless I really connect myself in the end to, as he says in the final passage there, to just listen to Hashem and be connected, right, to that. So thank you, Barbara. Here I squeezed you a bit, and you thank you, and you shared. So thank you so much. Okay, Laila tov to everyone.
Yeah. I wish you a great summer to everybody. לכולם.